Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome to Proper Madness. My name is Savvy, and I give a unique perspective on mental health by providing tools, guidance, and knowledge on how we can better understand ourselves, as well as our past and present experiences, and in doing so, we can help heal our mental health. I get to speak with a variety of individuals from around the world as they share their stories from their journey through their mental wellness so that it helps others stand strong and use their voice. Welcome back, everyone, to Proper Madness. Today, I have the lovely Maria on my podcast today. She is wonderful, and we've been kind of like internet friends for a little bit, and now we finally have connected, and she's coming on to the podcast, but I'll let her introduce herself and tell you more about what she does.
Hello, everybody. It's so nice to be here. First podcast, so this is exciting. Yeah. I'm Dibs on Self-Care is my name on Instagram. I'm a trauma-informed coach. I specialize in inner child work and trauma healing. I'm currently pursuing my master's degree in social work, so I'm in the process of becoming a therapist, although I'm a few years out, but well on my way. And it's just been an extremely gratifying and validating experience sharing my story online and trying to inspire other people who are in their own healing journeys, and just help them on their way, because I believe that with community, which is something that a lot of us are lacking, especially after and during the pandemic, that's how we can heal even more. So yeah, that's what I do.
Oh, I love the way you've put that too. I think community is just so important, with especially with mental health. I think like a lot of people struggle to find other people that have been through something similar or just a safe space to go to and to have, when you're on social media of all places, which sometimes can be like kind of triggering, but I think like I've seen all your material and it's just so it's just so relatable and it's so honest and it's so candid and authentic, and that's what makes it so amazing and helpful. So I always appreciate everything that you put out there.
I so appreciate that. Thank you. And I definitely feel the same. That's probably why we connected the way we did. I think that we both do our best to put out honest content and relate to people in a way that's unique, because like you said, so much of social media is kind of surface level and a little bit triggering and activating and not great things. So the more I believe that we share these honest experiences and stay true to our authentic selves and kind of like say the things we were always taught not to say, which is a big part of inner child work, which I'll get into, I think the better. So I'm hoping for a better online world for us all.
Yes. Oh, okay. I'm excited to dive into the inner child work because
Yeah.
it's something that I have done my whole life. Like I'm like lucky to have known that from such a young age, but a lot of people don't understand it and don't realize that it's so, oh my gosh, it's such a key core part of healing, because and obviously you can expand on this because you were like, you like specialize in this. It's just a key component to like reframing how we react to certain situations and how we show up and how we feel and how we heal. And we have like multiple inner children, you know what I mean? There's like from like different ages. I didn't know that up until recently, actually. And that we need to communicate to like those parts of ourselves to heal. So I'll let you take it away, but yes.
Well, thank you. And I like that you mentioned the multiple selves and the multiple inner children, because and a lot of the time I don't think of it that way. And then when I'm reminded of the different stages of childhood, of development, of teenage years, of adult years, it's like your inner child could even be you a few years ago. And that's what my most recent post was about, was like I was just grieving the person I once was, especially visually. I don't know if you've ever done that. I'm sure a lot of us have.
Yes.
Yeah. You look back at old pictures and you're like, man, I want to be there again. And it can be really hard, because even though you know you've grown so much since then, you still kind of, I don't even know what the word is, romanticize your old
Mhm.
life. And then you forget all of the tragedies, you forget all of the shortcomings. It's like we set aside how amazing it is where we are now. And we're just like, "Ah, I want to be there."
Yeah.
That's a
Oh,
big part of it as well. But I think for me, inner child work it's kind of a way of healing and recognizing our trauma in a way that is so compassionate for
mhm.
ourselves. Self-compassion is really difficult stuff. I mean, it seems like it would be easy, but our inner critic, that voice that is just constantly egging us to like feel guilty and feel shameful, is so powerful. And a lot of what we can learn in therapy, a lot of what we can, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, you can even do it with yourself, get the
Mhm.
CBT handbook or workbook, whichever one it's called. But those kinds of tools help us become aware of that inner critic, that voice that is so negative. And
Yeah.
inner child work kind of challenges you to say, no, but what would I say to like 5-year-old me, to 10-year-old me, to 15-year-old me who felt so alone, who felt so confused and like, I must be the only one in this difficult place.
Yeah.
And then when you see it through the lens of like, wow, actually, all of us were really struggling, but we just didn't want to talk about it because stigma,
Yeah.
it's a game changer.
Oh man, I love yeah, self-compassion.
Hmm.
Self-compassion with those like inner kids of ours that like need to be talked to, and I think reparented as well is huge, you know, like I've had to do like I the way I do my inner child work is interesting. It's
Hmm.
it's the more spiritual approach to it, which is like meditating and understanding that the way that my current reality is due to some sort of inner child like acting up a little bit, and like and how I respond, it won't be like an adult when I'm triggered. It's as if it's that inner child that experienced that trauma, you know what I mean? So it's good to hear you say that. Yeah, the self-compassion stuff, because you want to like for me, I would get mad at my inner children. I'd have so much, I'd carry so much like resentment and anger and sometimes fear, like with some of those traumas that I had experienced in my youth as I got older. And so there were a couple times where I think my therapist was like, Sabby, you need to write a letter to your inner child. And I was like, I really don't want to. I just don't like, I don't want to talk to her because I'm mad at her because of what she did and how she acted and, you know, all those things. But self-compassion is key. For some of my listeners who maybe don't understand why the inner child is important or like what it is exactly, do you mind like explaining it a little bit more in depth?
Yeah. So I think we all have slightly different definitions. And that's why I love this conversation right now, is because I'm hearing things that I either have never heard or have not heard in a while. And
Mm,
it kind of brings me back to this deep purpose I have to like
yeah.
share this message. I think for me, inner child work is basically the work that we do to connect with our younger selves in order to heal.
Mm,
I think it's very much healing based. And that's why a lot of therapists specialize in it, because that's really where the wounds are. I mean, so much of us have trauma from before we were, 18, before we were 21, before we really like dove more into our own independence under the roof of our caregiver's house.
yeah.
That is where a lot of it happens because it doesn't start with us. And intergenerational trauma is also part of inner child work. So
Mhm.
noticing, I didn't just get this out of nowhere. I like how you were mentioning that you felt mad at your inner children, because you're like, no, you should have acted differently.
Mm,
But then you think of yourself like as that little 10-year-old, like, how were you supposed to know?
yeah.
Right? How are you supposed
Mhm.
to know what's right? So I think it's so powerful to just do that work, which looks different for everyone. Writing a letter to your younger self, visualizing. To me, inner child work is visualization, seeing
Mhm.
yourself. Literally, I have screenshots of old baby pictures that I've taken. And I just look at those pictures and think, like, whoa, she really needed a hug,
Mm,
right?
Yeah.
So that's my answer. I know it's not
No,
a
that's
textbook definition, but
no, it's probably it's like perfectly explained, right? Because I think it's something that is easy to explain, but
yeah.
hard for some people to grasp and understand because they don't want to look back at that ever. I have a couple clients that I would tell the same. I'm like, you need to like write a letter to your old self, and they'd have this the same response. They'd be like, nah, I don't know. I'm like, okay, but like go look at a picture of your old self, and they're like, nah, I really don't want to. But that's
Yeah.
the hard part. It's kind of like that resistance to it is what we need to do because that's how you heal. You have to embrace like all those.
Mhm.
I'm like giving if people who are listening, I just did an air hug. You need to like hug like your
Yes.
younger self, yes, compassionately and emotionally. That's how it's done.
Yes, it's about like holding space, right?
Yes, yeah.
Holding space is such a beautiful way to put it too. It's just like you probably didn't have the freedom or the room or the space to cry, to be validated. Maybe your parents were really hurt themselves and they had not done the healing, so they couldn't be there to hold the space for you. And
Mm,
if you're now in this place in your life where you're able to heal and you're like, wait, I do have the emotional capacity. Like if someone came to me, I could probably on a good day help them. Why
yeah.
can't you do that for yourself? Why can't you do that for the younger you and not just
Mm.
that the next person that you meet? So it's like a gift to yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
We can always be really hard on ourselves too. I think that's one message I want to put in here is um I was filming this project the other day for therapeutic approaches. It was like a role play
Mm,
and we were doing solution focused therapy and I was playing the therapist. And oh man, I kept on saying to my partner, like, I feel like I'm messing it up. I don't think it's good. And guess what that was? Inner critic, right? The perceptions of everyone else that I'm putting on them, not even what they're telling me, right? And
yeah.
she's like, no, like, I genuinely mean this, Maria. I think you're doing amazing. I wish I was lying, she tells me. And I'm like, but are you though? And then it's like doubting what you're literally hearing. I think it's a
Mm,
self-protective coping mechanism. It's a defense mechanism. We're like, I don't want to believe it because what if it's wrong?
mm.
And oh my gosh, like if somebody's literally explicitly telling it to you, they're probably telling the truth. And why don't we just think of it in that sense? What if they're telling the truth?
Oh, yes, that's so true. The have you seen so what's the relationship you see most often with the inner critic and the inner child and how to kind of like,
Mm.
balance that out and have a better relationship between the two?
Mm. That's a really good question. I think that the inner critic, I almost see it as like your older self. This is just my own characterization. I see the inner critic as your older self or your alter ego,
Mm,
and the inner child as the younger you. And for me, what really helps is giving the inner critic a name, giving them a characterization. Like
yeah.
I remember I gave my inner critic a name and said she had like long black hair and she was really standoffish. She was older than me. She was very judgmental. And I think I named her Lorelei. Yeah, I just thought that was a really
Yes.
intense name. And literally just visualizing that helped me so much because I thought, now I can just assign it to someone and it's not me. It's literally taking it out of you
Oh,
into this alternate space. And that's why my therapist does a lot of a lot of somatic work because she doesn't want clients to feel like it's all up here in their head.
mm,
She wants them to literally feel where it is so that you can kind of move past it. And I think inner child is inside and inner critic is outside, even though we call it inner.
ah,
So I think it's almost like a battle between the inner and the outer self. And, the critic is like other people's emotions, other people's judgments, and that doesn't belong to us. Literally, like, think of yourself with this wall in between you and the judgmental force. It's like that is a great way to say, no, it's not mine. Their
yeah.
opinions, their criticisms, it's not mine. And that's like my favorite thing to say.
Oh, I
So,
love that. As you were explaining it, I got this like
mm,
visualization of like all these like words and like ideas and stories from other people, kind of like becoming this inner critic into like a character. And so I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, that's like totally what it is. It's kind of like it's kind of, there's this movie that I'm thinking of. I'm pretty sure it's a horror movie. I think it's it. I think I'm like thinking of how, how like our fear and our worst, like our deepest insecurities become that inner critic. And it's just like that voice in our head that's like always beating us down. I love that you turned it into a character to like depersonalize it. So you're like, hey, that's not what I actually think about myself, and that's not me thinking it. That I think that's amazing. That's a great way to do that. I did something interesting too. Like I used to have like similar to that. I used to have like an overthinky, very anxious, like grumpy character in my head that was an inner critic. And I would imagine it. I don't remember his name, but I did the same thing. I put a name and he was a character.
Yes.
He was like a mad scientist with a chalkboard trying to figure out every dang situation of like how something could go wrong.
Yeah.
And I would have to sit there and like talk to him in my head, sometimes out loud.
Yes.
And go,
And that's
hey,
not a crazy thing. That's a real
yeah,
strategy.
yeah. Oh my God, I used to do that all the time. Like with
Mhm.
social anxiety, with especially social anxiety, that's where I'd get it is like, hey, you can't say this, you can't do this because you're gonna look dumb or you're gonna look whatever. And so I'd turn to that mad scientist guy and be like, listen, no, it's not gonna happen. Put the chalkboard away. Or I just like imagine me, like younger me, taking it like an eraser and like erasing the chalkboard. So yeah, I resonate with that so much. It's so funny.
I love that. And you know what's interesting is the funnier you make it, the
Mm,
funnier, the weirder, the more bizarre you make that characterization, the more powerful it is. Because another thing my therapist does a lot is she talks about the concept of play and
mm,
how as children, this is another part of inner child, we're always playing, we want to experiment, be creative. And then as we move into adulthood, we don't have that same freedom, or at least we don't see that freedom because we
mm,
are chained to our jobs, our 9 to 5s, our responsibilities. And we forget that there are little ways to play. And one of those is imagination and visualization. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to have any special tools. It's always there. And so I love and I really appreciate that you're talking about the depersonalization in a funny way, because
mhm.
that's even more powerful in my opinion. So
Yeah, yeah. I have very dark humor generally. So I I feel like a lot of people, especially you, could probably relate to it. When you've been through a lot of stuff in life, it's like after you've done the healing, you kind of and you kind of look back at it after you've overcome it to like some extent. You kind of look back at it and you can make light of it, of like the darker times or like those darker situations. And I mean that's probably like a coping mechanism, but like I do genuinely find it funny sometimes.
yeah,
I don't know why, but yeah.
no, that's a real thing. And also coping mechanisms don't have to be positive or negative. They can be neutral. I
Yeah.
see humor as neutral or positive unless it's really self-deprecating where you're like harming yourself, putting
Oh,
yourself down. But typically it's neutral and it's okay. And why are we like saying, no, I shouldn't do that if it's helping
mm,
us? So I think you could be doing something else to cope, like using substances, those are more harmful to ourselves. But if we kind of transition to like, no, I can make a joke about it.
mm,
It's kind of like from going too soon, right? After something immediately happens and laughing
yeah,
about that to, no, I'm going to make jokes about it all the time. And when you laugh, other people laugh.
that's
They're
true.
like, oh, life is not that. I mean,
Serious.
it's terrifying, but
Yeah.
it's not that serious. Yeah,
Yeah.
not always.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think a lot of people take the healing journey generally very, I mean, like too seriously sometimes to the point where it's like there's this rigidity. I'm not saying that word. Wow.
Rigidity is hard to say.
Yeah. There's this, oh my God, I'm not gonna be able to say it. You said it, but there's almost like this perfectionism mindset behind trying to heal instead of allowing it to be whatever the heck it's gonna be and making it some form of lighthearted to an extent, right? I mean, not obviously not too much, otherwise then you're like minimizing it. and completely like not allowing yourself to feel valid in those traumas or situations. But there has to be some lightheartedness to it. Otherwise, like, it's just, I don't know. I see that a lot where people like I see mental health or trauma healing or anything like that just too serious all the time. And I'm going, hey, this isn't going to be this is going to make it more scary for people. If you just be human about it, then people are going to be more open and accepting to trying it and trying to heal and trying to move forward through it, you know?
Yes, and that's kind of the concept of reels, right? On Instagram with the funny audio and TikToks. Like, I don't like to do it maybe more than 50% of the time, but like I like to have a good almost half and half where, yes, here's the kind of hard stuff. And then here's where we laugh about it a little bit and relate to each other on it. And to me, that's a good balance because we can't have too much. And you're absolutely right. And I want to say, you commented on perfectionism. And I think a lot of us who grew up being afraid of making mistakes suffer with perfectionism as adults. That is personally my hardest thing. It's like, that's why my grid on Instagram is literally like a checkerboard, because I'm like, no, I need to have a reel and then a post, and it has to be contrasting. And I do that on 3 of my freaking accounts, but I'm not even kidding with you. Yeah, I do it for my nails. Like my nail designs, they have to be 3 in a row. I mean, this is borderline obsessive compulsive disorder, but it's also just like you develop these ways of coping when you didn't really know how to get through it. And I was petrified of making mistakes, probably from some, I don't know, educator or parents or whatever it was, but that is so normal. And I want to normalize that for, the listeners here. Like, it's okay if you have developed perfectionism as a means to cope, but it doesn't mean you have to be stuck on it forever. And that's where the healing comes in.
Yes, I love that. I love that so much. It's such a good, like, it's refreshing to hear, because it's like you're allowing people to understand, hey, it's okay that you have this coping mechanism, but let's gently move towards something that's going to be less like, I'm making a claw hand right now, less I can't think of a word, but you know what I mean, like
I do too.
Yeah, it's
just less intense. I don't know, there's just too much oh man, see, word finding issues on a Wednesday night. Like, this is where we're at right now.
Please enjoy our ramblings.
Absolutely. No, you know what? And that's another thing I say. Oh, sorry, I'm rambling. And then people are like, no, but you were saying something really like genuinely interesting. And then I'm like, oh, whoops, there's another one. There's another way of coping. And I'm just gonna over apologize all the time.
Oh my God. No, actually, I like hearing that, because I'm like the queen of rambling, and I give myself such a hard time because I used to have partners in the past, or even people have actually, someone I recently did, like, I love sending voice notes, right?
Oh yeah.
Voice memos, and I just would ramble, but like in those rambles, to be honest, like some of those things were pretty like ingenious. This guy would make fun of me and be like, listen, like, your voice memo, I love your voice memos, but like, you kind of just like go on tangents and you ramble. Whereas my friends, they've never criticized it, they've never had an issue with it, but it's a telltale like example of what you talked about earlier, which is like their inner critic just kind of builds off of the input of other people because of their own insecurities. You know what I mean? So like,
that is so powerful. And it can be a jealousy issue, right? With partners, with others. Is like I also dated somebody who said I talked too much. And it's very interesting because I think it's a threat in heterosexual relationships. We have a lot of, men might feel threatened if they are not secure in themselves, if a woman is more educated. I know that that's a really common one, but even regardless of your gender, your sexual orientation, I mean, we can all feel a little bit of envy when we don't speak as eloquently, when we don't write as easily. And there's also a really personal feeling of like not being educated enough or not knowing something. I always appreciate hearing I had a friend who, when I would say a word that she didn't know, I think English was either her second language or she learned it in conjunction with Spanish.
Yeah.
She would say, "What does that mean?" And I told her once, I said, "I really appreciate that you ask me what it means because so many people can't even admit that. And these are not like mainstream words.
Mm.
I'm just a, kind of like English grammar nerd and I can't do math to save my life, but we all have our strengths and weaknesses, is my
Yeah.
point. And we shouldn't feel threatened by people's ingenuity. Like you
Mhm.
clearly have value to what you're saying. He just probably, they were threatened
But
by it.
that's what I mean. I realized it actually as you said. I didn't, that's not something I even realized until you said that, like, oh my gosh, I ramble. And I'm like, oh my, no, you don't ramble. And I stopped, like, oh my God, someone told me the other day that I ramble. And none of my closest friends say that I ramble, not a single person. In fact, most of them enjoy it, so it's like, so, thank you. You kind of like highlighted something for
Oh,
me.
I'm so glad. Yeah, it's kind of like go where you're celebrated, not tolerated. We all have that.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. I feel like we all should adopt that. I think that's what would make our inner children very happy because kids need to be celebrated and affirmed. Obviously, like parented to some extent, but like it should be in a lighthearted ways. And you have to do that for yourself, like the reparenting for your inner child. So yes, go where you're celebrated, not tolerated. Oh my gosh, this is a new motto, everyone. You need to adopt this motto
Yeah.
ASAP.
Get it tattooed if you need to. No,
Oh,
maybe
please.
maybe not, but anything that reminds you of it, you know what I
Maybe
mean?
not. Oh man.
Just think about your decisions twice. I always say like if you're going to make a decision, like sleep on it or give it a week because emotional decisions for me are really big.
Yeah.
Not just with tattoos, but that's another one. Impulsivity. Yay, inner child, people who were too scared to do anything. Now they're the flip side. I need to do everything.
I want to go back to you kind of highlighted and mentioned like some of the things that you struggled with. Do you mind
Mhm.
talking about a little bit of your story and like what you went through and like what
Mhm.
inspired you to start doing what you're doing?
Absolutely, absolutely. So what's funny is this account, Dibs on Self-Care, was actually a fitness account from 2016. I was part of a fitness program and I kind of abandoned the account because I had moved on from that program and it was just sort of sitting there. And I actually saw a medium
Mm.
who I was talking to. I even she kind of knew my trauma without me even saying it. Like it was really, really fascinating.
Oh
And
wow.
I grew up very religious, so I was always told like, don't listen to a palm reader, don't listen to a medium. Um, but it was very, very groundbreaking because she encouraged me to take that account and turn it into something where I share my story and where I, turn my traumas into my triumphs, as my friend Whitney says. It's
Mm.
kind of like this beautiful way to reframe. And it kind of reminded me that even if you started something that's not really aligning anymore, you can change it. So that's how it started in 2019 is when I flipped script over there. And I kind of got into it more seriously after last summer when I had a relapse with my major depressive disorder. It was probably, I think, my fifth or sixth episode. And it was so bad that I went to the hospital. It was just a very dark time. And it kind of spiraled and spiraled into paranoia, into such intense, crippling fear. And I dropped out of my grad program. That wasn't right for me. After multiple failures, I got on the right medication, and that really started my upward journey. But the main thing that it taught me was I needed to stop something that wasn't right for me. And that is so hard because our society constantly tells us you need to finish what you started.
Mm.
And I hate that phrase because no, I don't encourage people to give up, but giving up is different than discontinuing, in my opinion. They're two different things. You can discontinue a job, you can discontinue a relationship, an education path, a field, a career, but you don't have to give up on yourself. And I felt this like inner knowing, this kind of deep desperation It was like my inner child was trying to break free. And I was like, no, this isn't right for me. But I had all this student debt that I had accumulated in 1 year at a private school. And I felt like I'm in too deep. And that's how I became suicidal. It was kind of like this, I can't go back type of thing. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done, leaving that program. It was the hardest thing still being in the kind of space of these people that were continuing on who I had come to know. I found out who my real friends were. I found out who couldn't handle my darkness and who could. Um, my current partner, he was there with me through the whole thing. He would stay on the phone with me for 3 hours and just let me talk. And I just didn't know that kind of forgiving, I don't know, that beautiful connection existed with people. And it taught me, like, my message for everyone here is, if you feel like you're too much for someone, they're probably just the wrong person. So if you have a friend who says, I can't listen to your stuff, you know what? That just might not be the right friendship for you. That might not be the right relationship for you. And all of that to say, that was the darkest time of my life, and also the biggest pivot toward what I'm doing now. And because of my, hospital situation, and because of my experience with psychiatrists and doctors who were extremely invalidating, I turned toward, the therapeutic route, and I found social work, which I had learned about in my psychology undergrad, but I was like, no, 3,000 hours post grad to get your license. Hell no, I'm not doing that. And I realized, no, Maria, the time is going to pass anyway. So you might as well do something that you want to do and that you could be good at. So yeah, that was the real pivot. That's when I kind of started to take the account really seriously, turn it into what it is. And I've kind of been going ever since. So that's how it got started.
Well, yeah, thank you for sharing like your journey and all of that, because I feel like a lot of people can relate to that, of being in like one of your more darker moments in life and having that moment where you just take a shift and you kind of step into your purpose accidentally without even realizing it or knowing it, you know?
Yes, it finds you most of the
Yeah.
time. And that's what I tell people about social work. I'm like, no one wakes up one day like as a 15-year-old and says, like, I'm going to be a social worker. I mean, some people probably do, but it's usually because you know someone who is mistreated, you are someone who is mistreated, or you just connect with people who are mistreated. And it's wanting to flip the script. And it's not an easy path. Many things aren't. You know what I mean? Many things in this life are not easy, but we just assign labels because it's what we've seen in media. I'm not going into child protective services. I want to be a community advocate, and I want to be a counselor. And there's so much that you can do with one path. We see these limits before we see these opportunities.
I like that. Yeah. It's true. We always see like the limit before the opportunity. I think just because of like a conditioning of not being good enough to do what we want to do, or not knowing if we can do it, instead of just like taking the risk and doing it. Like when we're children, when we first learn how to walk and crawl and talk, we just do it. We're not thinking about the limits. We just do it, you know? So I feel like you explained that so well. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And a big part of it too is being afraid of what people will think. And with social media, which we talked about at the beginning, there's this fear as well of, oh, people are going to see me make a misstep and they're going to judge me. And I had been very public, very public about my past grad school experience. And I was documenting the whole thing. And then all of a sudden she just deactivates her account and then archives half the posts. And then, oops, she's back. But I took a long time to tell people what I was doing. And I never made an official post on Instagram on my, personal account. I just didn't feel like I needed to. And it was that decision of, I don't owe anyone any explanation at all.
Yes, I agree with everything that you said, though, because I think it's very necessary to share these things with other people, to realize and understand that like your traumas don't have to hold you back, and they don't have to be this like thing that just weighs on you 24/7, where it feels like you're like debilitated and that like you're never going to get out of it and you're never going to learn from it. It's not true. Like I think you you had the mindset of like, okay, I've hit my bottom. Now, how can I get through this? And like, what am I going to do about it? And then you made the choice to like leave something that was no longer serving you, which is so good. Many people just are scared to do that. And they have to do it, in my opinion. I think they need to, because otherwise you're going to keep suffocating yourself over and over again. You're going to stay in that same loop, in that same cycle. You're always like one decision away from the life that you want to live. So yeah.
Ooh, that's powerful. And it's kind of like the sunk cost fallacy, I think it's called, where the more time you've invested into something or someone, the harder it is to leave it. So I was like, all right, 50K in the hole. This is gonna be rough. No, like seriously, I was like, there's no way. And so that was the hard part, is thinking like I've wasted money, I've wasted time, and I've wasted energy and my health. And then I realized that like something you can get back is money. Something you cannot get back is your well-being if you go too far, right?
Yeah.
The dark place that I was in, where I had to go to the hospital, that is something you can't get back if you were to make a different decision. And so and my therapist was the only person who was telling me to leave. She's like, Ray, you need a break. Your nervous system is completely overwhelmed. You can't focus. How are you even gonna, she was the only person who was telling me to stop. And that was the hardest part, was knowing that my peers, my parents, other people in my life were like, no, you can do it. And I'm like, no, you're not hearing me. I can't do it. And that's okay. Just because you can't do something doesn't mean it's a failure. So I think that's a really important lesson to learn, that we all will probably learn at some point, but the earlier the better. My opinion, just to save yourself a little bit of, difficulty. But
yeah. No, I think that's just, it's so beautiful to hear that. It really is.
Thank you for letting me share.
Yeah, oh my, of course. I thank you for sharing it, because a lot of people really need to hear that. It's something that people don't talk about ever at all. So, and it's sad, but it's something that needs to be normalized, I think, a bit more.
Yes, yes. And the shame that comes with it. I think guilt and shame are the inner child. I don't know. I think it's like the best friend of the inner child, but also the worst enemy. I think that in us, we have so much guilt and shame that's internalized from, especially from abuse, but from any type of trauma. It's just like you internalize everything that's happened to you, thinking that it's your fault. And that is the hardest thing to break, is like, no, I was doing the best I could with what I had at the time. And if that wasn't enough, then I wouldn't be growing the way that I am. So that's what I really want to tell people. If there's any like nugget, is just like, you literally were doing the best that you could with what you had at the time, and that's enough. And that's where that self-compassion comes in. Your guilt and shame is not you. It's just something that you developed because you couldn't help it.
That's so powerful. I mean, if someone gets a nugget, they're gonna get so many nuggets, Maria.
I'm so glad to hear that. I'm like, you know what? We think that we're not all that powerful. And I'm like, I think that part of it is not that one of us is more intelligent than the other or more enlightened than the other. It's that we hear things from other people when we need to hear them. And that's what makes it powerful, is that it's like we almost switch off who's the one who can help someone else. So I see it that way. I don't know. Anytime you are given this platform to share, it can really remind you of what you're doing and why, because we can get burnt out by sharing when especially views don't live up to what we want them to be. And why did that reel get 5 million views and it's like, a cat walking? And I'm like, well, I understand because I love cats, but you know what I mean? And like, I sunk 4 hours into this damn reel and it's not going anywhere. Like,
I'm laughing so hard because I'm not kidding. 20 minutes ago, well, not 20 minutes, like an hour and a half ago, I was on TikTok, and I'm like looking at these TikToks, I'm like, why is some guy just standing in his kitchen, like nodding his head to music and some words, and that has like 500,000 views, yet my emotional short film got like 500. I was like sitting there going, how? I was like, how does this even happen? Oh my gosh, cracking up.
Yes.
Yeah, but you're right. It's like reconnecting to your why and your deeper purpose is truly all that matters. And like I think staying aligned with people who help you embody that and help you stay in that purpose, as opposed to like I think I have so many friends that are like, oh, when are you gonna like go viral? When are you gonna be famous? Like when are you, I'm like, but like, it's not, I'm like, it's not really about that. Like for me, it's if it happens, cool. If it doesn't, it's not meant to for some reason. And what's meant to happen is like I'm supposed to help people and change the world in some way and impact them, not like the material stuff that comes with it, you know? So I love what you said. It's just like reconnecting to that deeper purpose and understanding like where you came from and like how you got through it and like the purpose that you got shoved into and like how to just be that light for other people too, you know? So I
That's what
appreciate
it's all
you.
about.
Yeah,
Thank you
I
so much.
appreciate you very much. My last question is, and I ask people this at the end, if
Mhm.
anyone has resonated with anything that you've talked about, what
Mhm.
would be the advice that you give them?
Mm, I think for me, the thing I want to relate to people the most is to find a community, a person, a subject where you feel like you're heard and seen and loved and understood. I hope people tune into my page and see that and feel that. I hope that I can guide more people through the hard times in their life. I hope that what I learned in my studies and in my own experience, I can pass on to clients in my own self-care coaching. I hope that, I can be that, but no one is going to have everything for everyone. And also knowing each and every one of you that you cannot be everything for everyone. Like you are not the friend who can be the therapist, the fun one, the mom of the group. You can't be everything. So do what you feel is aligned with you and go where you feel you are celebrated, not tolerated, as we spoke about before. I just want people to feel like they have a place because we all need a place and a purpose. And with those two things, we can do amazing things.
Mm.
That would be my answer.
Oh, that was beautiful and it's touched my soul very deeply. And I'm probably gonna like re-listen to this episode a million times because it's truly like it's something that I need to hear like in this moment. So like
Yeah.
what you said was just it
Mhm.
like it came from the heart and I think people really need to hear that. So yeah.
Thank you. And I
Sure.
just, oh, yeah, this is really, it's inspirational and it reminds me of what I'm doing. So thank you for doing what you're doing and for helping get people's messages and people's stories out there because that's how we all grow and I don't know, band together to form that community. It's a beautiful thing.
Oh, yes.
So on Instagram, I am at Dibs on Self-Care. TikTok is the same. I am not on it that much, but I will soon be really launching into it. And then in the link in my bio, you can find my other links. You can find where to apply for coaching, where to get some cool merch that's like not from me, but mental health related items that are really fun. And yeah, those are like my two places that you can find me the best. So
Oh,
yeah,
well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you coming on and doing this.
I appreciate you very much.
Thank you so much for listening. And remember, you have to go through the eye of the storm to see the clear horizon ahead. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you next week.